Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present. Now, I'm going to be talking about a project today that basically involves working with Yucatec Maya communities to develop a culturally relevant biology curriculum. So my advisor is Dr. Melissa McCartney, so she's here as well. And before I get started, just to contextualize, so this picture is a picture of an archaeological site at Muyil, and our project is happening in 5 different communities. One of the communities is right next to this archaeological site, and so this is something that the students will see every single day. And so it's just something to help you understand the context. Now, the curriculum that we're testing is a curriculum that is written entirely in Yucatec Maya. Now, why is it important to develop curricula in Indigenous languages? Well, 40% of the global population does not have access to an education that is in a language that they speak or understand. When we start thinking about learning, and we start thinking about specifically learning science and trying to protect biodiversity, you can imagine how not having access to an education in your language is a huge challenge. So UNESCO recommends that for the first 6 years of schooling, that the educational content that's taught in schools be taught in the student's first language. But if you are from an Indigenous community, there are oftentimes not even curricula that can be used to teach these languages. And while a lot of effort, especially in Mexico, is happening to teach these languages, oftentimes what students learn in Yucatec Maya is really your basic, what you're learning to learn a language. So for example, your greetings, colors, numbers, but it's very rare that students are learning how to talk about their environment. And so anyway, the curriculum that we're working with was developed by a nonprofit organization called Marine Conservation Without Borders. And that's the goal, is to develop a science curriculum that teaches about local biodiversity in the language that students speak at home. So it helps teach not only about biodiversity and science, but also about, it also helps teach the language and teach students how to read the language, which is a huge priority when we start thinking about protecting cultures and languages as well. So some of the topics that the curriculum focuses on are basically local ecosystems and organisms. So we have howler monkeys, scarlet macaw, manatees, sea turtles, mangroves, the sailfin catfish. We talk about sargassum. So those are just some of the chapters that the curriculum currently includes. And something important to mention with this curriculum is that yes, it's a science curriculum, but it's also a really important tool for documentation of the language, because the act of developing these curriculum has involved working with linguists to ensure that all the terminology in Maya is accurate, is based on historical texts and things. So anyway, we have a great team of people who have been involved in the development of the curriculum, and specifically have focused on the Yucatec Maya language. So what exactly are we trying to study with this? So the focus of my research is really focused on identity development. So I'm interested in understanding, how does learning science in your language through a curriculum that is written in Yucatec Maya and incorporates Yucatec Maya knowledge, understanding, wisdom about the environment, how does that affect the way students relate to the content that they're learning? So how does it affect the way their cultural identity develops, and how does it affect the way their science identity develops? So basically, how does this curriculum affect the way students relate to science and culture? Now, the 5 communities we're working in are in the Yucatan Peninsula and Quintana Roo. So here's a map that shows you where they are. One important thing to note is that they're very close to La Reserva de Siamcan. So there's a lot of really rich biodiversity in this area where the students are living. So how exactly are we testing the materials? Thanks to funding from the Tinker Grant last year, I was able to go for 3 weeks in the summer. And basically, we are working with local university students who speak Yucatec Maya. These students, there's 10 of them, and they were dispersed along the 5 communities. And so we basically supported them as they taught a summer program with the curriculum. After that summer program, the same curriculum was then implemented by teachers as part of the school year. And throughout this process, we are doing pre and post interviews. So we did interviews in the summer when we kind of started testing the materials. And then in January, we just returned to do post interviews as well. So we've done 2 field trips so far. And yeah, so this shows you some of these pictures here show you some of the people who have been involved in this project. We're working with students, teachers, parents, and when I say students, I mean primary school students. Oh goodness, I realized I didn't mention this is a curriculum for primary school. So basically we're working with a range of participants. In January, we actually also incorporated interviewing elders as well, so that all of these community perspectives can inform the way that we're developing this biology curriculum. So that it's really rooted in what the priorities of the community are when it comes to knowing about nature and science. So in these images, we have some focus groups happening with students, parents, and the picture to the right is a picture of an interview between some of the university students who have been involved in the project too. So a little bit more on the role of the university students. So they not only taught the summer program, but they're also, because of their ability to speak Maya, they are helping us with interviewing and conducting the interviews, teaching workshops. And so as part of this, we're also providing skills for them in qualitative research. And yeah, so they've also helped with transcribing the interviews, translating them. So yeah. So our goals are basically to collect the perspectives of the community to help inform the curriculum's development. We also want to learn about new topics that should be incorporated, maybe topics that are really important for the culture. For example, chapter on cenotes, chapter on the milpa, which is basically a traditional Maya food forest. So basically continuing to think about how can we contextualize this curriculum. So we've learned a lot so far. I'll try to breeze through these, but if I run out of time, feel free to stop me. So, one of the things we've noticed as we've tested the curriculum is that the curriculum itself would benefit from some more experiential learning. And so now we're in the process of incorporating some more citizen science types of activities in the curriculum and continuing to think about how can we create experiences for the students as they're learning about biology and continue to teach it in Yucatec Maya. So we also learned that some of our participants, especially the younger ones, had a hard time expressing themselves in interviews. So this winter, we reworked some of our data collection to incorporate a quantitative survey instrument. And we also implemented a photo elicitation activity where we sent the students to basically answer a few questions and take pictures of in their community of what they felt answered the question. So for example, what ecosystems represent your community? And the kids would go take pictures of the ecosystems that are in their community. And then we kind of continued to think about how do we ask these questions so that young students can talk to us about their knowledge and understanding of the environment. So we also learned that within the 5 communities that we're working, there's some variation in the proficiency of in the students' proficiency speaking Maya. In one community, you may have one household that the parents only speak Maya with the students at home. They're pretty much only speaking Maya after school. And then you may have another household where the students don't speak Maya. And so, learning how can we manage that in classrooms that are in these communities. So we also learned about some of the conflicts that exist when we discuss cultural identity, especially with the parents, because we noticed how basically when there are certain people who will be able to relate to being Indigenous more than others, even if they speak Maya, they may point to a different community and say, oh, but if you really want to know about Maya culture or really want to know about Maya knowledge, you want to go to that community. But yet this community right here is speaking Maya and conducting, Maya practices. And so there's some conflicts in, identity development there. And then another thing we noticed is that depending on the ecosystem depending on the content, there were certain chapters that the students enjoyed more than others, and some of that could have something to do with the coastal communities versus the inland communities. So one of our communities, Muyil, which is the one that had the picture that I showed you on my first slide, that community is coastal, and so the students there related really differently to mangroves than some of the more inland communities. We've also learned about some of the complexities involved with working with 3 different languages in terms of our data, because our data is in Maya, Spanish, and English, and our goal is really to work collaboratively with the university students to conduct the analysis. And so, you know, we've worked on several trainings to work through that, and yeah, and we've also continued to isolate some new potential chapters as well. Another big takeaway, I mean, really one of the things we've learned, I can't give you guys like clear results yet because we're still in the process of analyzing all of our data. So I'm giving you the highlights, but overall the community had a really positive attitude towards curricula in Maya, towards the idea of teaching science in Maya. We even had parents approach us asking, when are you going to offer something for adults? Because everyone in the community wants to learn Maya. It's not just the kids. So it's been quite a journey. Some of where we're headed in the future is, you know, right now we're planning to go back in the summer to continue following up with some of the communities, with some of the parents, the teachers, the elders. And so as part of this training, we plan to focus on several things, including, you know, some qualitative skills development, teach them how to code data, how to do analysis. But we also want to talk to them a little bit more about fostering cultural identity in the communities. So basically, how do you talk about culture? How do you talk about the way that, your culture affects the way you understand science? And so we're going to be talking more about that. We're also planning to introduce some citizen science kits that will give students the opportunity to do science instead of just learning about it. So really getting them some more hands-on activities. We're in the process of developing new chapters, and of course also a teacher's guide so that the teachers have an easier time teaching some of the materials. So basically that's where we're at in this process. I'll take off my screen while we go through some questions, but yeah, that's my presentation on developing culturally relevant biology curricula. Hello?
Last question. She's making so much effort. It's me, Kathy. I just want to congratulate for such a wonderful job you are doing over there. And I think that these, and you know, my questions, what is cultural identity and what is scientific identity? I really don't understand yet what scientific identity is. But if you could tell us a little bit, and that just came up when you were talking, what is the level of literacy of the parents and the community in general? That is one question, and because I then going to sit down, the second question is, so you are going to a place to study their culture, and then you're going to be bringing in some workshops to teach them what culture means.
Yeah, so, let me further explain that.
And then I'm going to sit down, okay?
Yeah, and apologies for going through some of this stuff quickly. I know I'm on a time limit, so I'm trying to be as concise as possible, but some of these things do require some more explanation. So that last part about the workshop on cultural identity, that actually came about because of when we were in the communities, we were working with some family members of people in the communities, and we had a student who is from these communities who basically, as a profession, he teaches university students about cultural identity development. And so we are thinking about, within our community, what are some of the issues that we're seeing? For example, we have noticed how some people will speak Maya fluently, but not relate to that as their identity. And that's okay. But we want to help the students understand, you know, how, because one of the reasons for these conflicts that exist when it comes to cultural identity is because of the history of indigeneity in Mexico. There has been a lot of just historical trauma, a lot of, you know, people who will basically, they'll speak Maya, but when it comes to, you know, certain practice, you know, they're just feeling conflicted in that identity. So it's not us really offering that workshop from, you know, us coming from FIU designing the workshop. That is something that is taking place internally from, you know, within the communities. That's something that the university students we're working with really said, man, this is something we need to do. So something that has happened a lot with this project is that because of the fact that our project is so ingrained in working with the community, it means that a lot of the ideas that have come about have come from, like, a lot of how we're moving forward in this research process is thinking, you know, what is it that the community wants? And so working with the people that are there to develop the process. And so it's an interesting way to do research. And so I think that was your first point, Lihia. And I forget what the other thing you wanted me to address was.
The level of literacy of
okay, right, level of literacy. And this is a great question. We've seen a range. We have parents who have gone to college, who have completed bachelor's degrees, and we have parents who have not gone to school at all. And I would say in general, most of the parents are not able to, like, I struggle with generalizing, but in general, we've had a lot of parents who have not been able to read. And we've had some parents who, like, you know, maybe we have a lot of parents who cannot read, but we also have a lot of parents who can. And so, you know, that's something that we think about a lot too, is when we're working through our process, we have to be very mindful of, like, what is the history there.